My husband abandoned me days before birth to comfort his ex, then lied, kissed her, and blamed me. My husband left me 2 days before my due date to fly across the world and comfort his ex. But that wasn't even the worst part. What happened when he came back, with a kiss, a lie, and a wave of guilt-tripping messages, broke me in ways I never expected. Hey Reddit, I'm in the middle of a really messy situation, and I could really use some outside perspective or advice. I'm a 34-year-old woman, and my husband, Caleb, he's 38, has been in my life for 6 years now, and we've been married for 1. We originally met through work, so I didn't know much about his life before me. But over time, as things got serious, we both opened up and shared that we'd each only had one real relationship before meeting each other, right after college. For my part, I dated someone for about 3 years, 2 during college and 1 afterward. But we eventually went our separate ways due to personal differences. We didn't stay in touch, and by the time I met Caleb, that chapter had been closed for nearly 5 years. Caleb, on the other hand, was still talking to his ex when we started seeing each other. They were actually still pretty good friends. Her name's Sienna, and she was his high school sweetheart. They got together at 16 and stayed a couple all through college. Just like with my ex, they'd also been broken up for about 5 years by the time he and I got involved. According to Caleb, the reason they split up was because Sienna got a job opportunity in Australia and was determined to pursue her career. He didn't want to do long distance, so they tried to make it work for a little while but eventually agreed it was best to let go. They had a lot of mutual friends, so even after the breakup, they stayed in each other's orbit and remained friendly. At first, I didn't really have a problem with that. I trusted Caleb, and he always spoke about Sienna in such a respectful way. But then, about 9 months into our relationship, I met his group of friends for the first time. It was New Year's Eve, and he brought me along to this big dinner so he could introduce me to everyone. That's when I met Sienna in person for the first time, and yeah, I was caught off guard. He hadn't warned me she'd be there. Going into it, I wasn't feeling jealous or uncomfortable. Based on how Caleb described her, I expected someone really chill and kind. But when I started talking to her, the vibe was completely different than what I'd imagined. She came off cold, almost sharp. She made a few pretty nasty comments about me right there in front of everyone. And the worst part? Everyone just laughed it off like that was totally normal for her. Apparently, that was just her sense of humor. I didn't find any of it funny. Honestly, I don't think anyone really caught on because she wrapped all her digs in jokes. Like when she said it was surprising to finally see me in person because, apparently, I looked nothing like I did in photos. Then she followed that up with a jab about how Caleb usually went for tall blondes, and since I was neither, she was surprised I was his type. Of course, she fit that description perfectly. Everyone just laughed like she was being playful, but I felt the sting. She even threw in a comment about how I was her replacement, and joked that it was her duty to give me a crash course on how to keep Caleb satisfied. I tried to tell myself maybe it really was her offbeat humor, like everyone claimed, so I stayed quiet and gave her the benefit of the doubt. But things got worse once we started drinking. She raised her glass to toast Caleb finally moving on and said how happy she was for him. At first, I thought that was a sweet gesture, until she added that if she hadn't taken that job in Australia, I probably wouldn't even be sitting there. That made the room go awkwardly silent. Nobody really laughed, except her. She chuckled to herself, and then everyone sort of gave these uncomfortable laughs just to move past it. But I caught it. That comment said everything. It was clear she still felt like Caleb somehow belonged to her. When we got home that night, I told Caleb straight up that if he wanted a future with me, he needed to set some boundaries with her. I made it clear I didn't want any more conversations with Sienna. She hadn't just been disrespectful, she had openly talked down to me all night. I kept my cool once, but I wasn't about to go through that again. I dealt with stuff like this in past relationships, and I knew better now. I set my line in the sand. To his credit, Caleb understood. He said he also thought she acted weird and agreed it would be best to cut her off. He told me he didn't want our relationship to be affected by whatever weird grip Sienna still thought she had on him. After that conversation, I never heard him bring up her name again. He said he blocked her, and I believed him. Over the months that followed, I hung out with his friends a bunch of times. Nobody ever mentioned Sienna again, which I figured meant Caleb told them how I felt. Everything was going smoothly. At least, it was, until last week. I'm actually pregnant, and last Sunday was supposed to be my due date. It's Thursday now. Caleb left a couple of days before my due date to be with Sienna because she had some kind of emergency and said she needed him by her side. He just packed up and left, and came back late last night. We got into a huge fight over it. I had no idea they were still in contact. I mean, He told me months ago that he had blocked her on everything. But apparently, she reached out to him using a different number, and he claimed she sounded desperate. He said she had just been diagnosed with stage 2 brain cancer and had no one else to lean on. I was beyond angry. I couldn't wrap my head around how he could abandon me when I was this far along. I mean, I understood that news like that must have hit hard. He used to be close with her, and hearing something like that would shake anyone. But still, it's not like she was on her deathbed that very moment. He could have waited a few days, seen his child be born, and then gone to check on her. But no, he got the message and immediately decided he had to go. I told him it was ridiculous. I was on the edge of giving birth, and he was running off across the world to comfort an ex. He told me not to worry, said he'd be back before I went into labor, and reminded me that due dates aren't exact. I could go another week or more. Then he just told me to deal with it until he returned, and walked out to catch his flight without even finishing the conversation. The worst part? He knew I didn't have anyone else around. My parents live in Iowa, and I was counting on him to be here. After he left, I tried calling him again and again, but his phone was off. I was scared and completely overwhelmed, so I called his mom instead. Thankfully, she's always been kind to me. As soon as I told her what was going on, through tears, because I was just a wreck, she dropped everything and came right over. She tried calling him too, but no luck. Phone still off. She stayed with me the whole day while I cried and spiraled emotionally. Pregnancy hormones just made everything feel 100 times worse. It wasn't until the next day that we finally got a response. He didn't call us back, just sent a text. He said he'd try to get back before the baby arrived and that he was sorry for leaving like that. He told me I could punish him however I saw fit once he was home. But for now, he felt like he had to be there for Sienna. Apparently, she didn't have family in Australia, and her parents couldn't come see her because her dad was very sick. So she was relying on Caleb to help her process everything. Honestly, that explanation just made me angrier. In his mind, a cancer diagnosis was a bigger emergency than me being about to give birth. But I kept thinking, what was he going to do? Heal her? Reverse the diagnosis? No. Meanwhile, I was left alone, about to bring our child into the world. His mom was on the same page. When she read his message, she looked at me and asked point blank, "Do you want to leave him?" I didn't hesitate. I said yes. So, she contacted her lawyer and had him draft divorce papers, along with an agreement to remove Caleb's parental rights. She told me that if he managed to return before the baby was born, the decision was still mine. I could either go through with the divorce or talk things out with him first. But if he didn't show up in time, well, that said everything I needed to know. She had raised Caleb alone. His dad skipped out and never even met him, so I could see why she felt so strongly about this. She even promised me she'd make sure Caleb paid child support and that I wouldn't go through what she went through, struggling alone with a newborn. She stood by me through everything that week. Neither of us reached out to Caleb again. Then, on Monday, I went into labor. While I was in the hospital, his mom tried calling to let him know I was giving birth. But again, no answer. This time, she didn't even bother texting him. She figured, what's the point? My parents had flown in the day before, which was incredibly lucky, because they were there for me when I went into labor. But even with them by my side, I felt Caleb's absence like a punch to the gut. And in that moment, I made up my mind, no matter what happened when he came back, I couldn't look at him the same way ever again. So, I went ahead and signed the divorce papers. I asked the lawyer to file them on my behalf so we could get the ball rolling right away. I did it barely 3 hours after giving birth. I could hardly hold the pen, but I pushed through. One look at my daughter was all it took to realize that if I wanted to be a good dad, I needed to be good to myself first. And that meant walking away from a man who had made it crystal clear that Sienna still came first in his life, not me. I didn't even tell him our daughter had been born. After we got home from the hospital, I stayed with my parents and my mother-in-law. My parents are heading back tomorrow, so it'll just be me and her for a while. I told all of them I was done with Caleb. He hadn't even tried to call or message me, even after promising he'd be back before the due date. Instead, he'd spent the entire week with Sienna. He came home really late last night. I opened the door, and without saying a word, he pulled me into a hug. I pushed him off right away and told him I didn't want anything to do with him. The moment he stepped inside, my mother-in-law came into the room with the paperwork. She literally tossed it at his face and told him to get out. Right now. She didn't care where he went or what he did. She just wanted him out of the house because I needed peace and rest. I had just given birth, and he hadn't even been there for it. She told him I had already signed the divorce papers and that he needed to sign off on giving up his parental rights too. He just stood there, stunned. speechless for a good couple of minutes. I didn't stick around to hear more. My mother-in-law was right. I was still physically weak, and I needed space. Seeing him again was already messing with my resolve, and I didn't want to make things harder than they already were. So I left the room, placed my daughter in her crib, and just tried to breathe. Then I heard shouting. Caleb had started arguing with his mom, and things were getting heated. I stayed in the other room. I didn't want to get involved. After a while, I heard him calling out my name, asking me to come out and talk to him, saying I should at least let him see his daughter because I owed him that much. That word, owed, really hit a nerve. So I came back into the room. I looked him in the eye and told him straight up, I don't owe you anything. You made a choice. You knew I was days away from giving birth, and you still walked out. You weren't there for me. You weren't there when your daughter was born. You left me completely alone, and I was lucky your mom stepped up. So no, I don't owe you a damn thing. I told him that the baby was asleep, and I didn't want her waking up. So he needed to leave, and we could deal with all this in the morning. He eventually walked out, and I noticed he had tears in his eyes. Before leaving, he tried to talk to me one more time, but I pulled back and told him again I wanted him to go. We were exhausted, so we all went to bed. But first thing this morning, he showed up again. This time, I told him to his face, it's over. For me, it ended the second he left to be with Sienna. There's nothing he could say now that would change that. My mother-in-law was in the room with us, but I had already asked her to let me speak to him alone. I needed to say it myself, and I wanted to be clear. That's when he completely broke down. He started crying loudly and begging me to reconsider. My mother-in-law had to take the baby out of the house because he was making such a scene, and she didn't want our daughter to hear any of it. He kept repeating that Sienna had begged him to come, that she told him she was dying, and she didn't have anyone else. He said he only stayed because she had no family in Australia and was completely alone. He swore everything was platonic, that he was just there to comfort her. But I wasn't there, so how would I know? And at that point, it didn't matter anymore. I told him I was done and wanted him to leave. Then he started pleading with me not to take away his chance to be a father. Even if I wanted a divorce, he said cutting him off from his daughter was too extreme. He asked me to reconsider or else he'd have to fight for custody. But deep down, I think even he knows he doesn't have much ground to stand on. He missed the birth. He bailed on me when I needed him most. And our daughter? She's a newborn. Right now, she needs her mom far more than a dad who wasn't even around at the start. Still, he kept begging for just one more shot. Said all he really wanted was to have a family again. He did leave, eventually, but not before asking me one last time to think about it. And now, I honestly don't know what the right move is. This isn't just some small decision. It affects real lives, and I want to be completely sure before I go through with something I can't take back. So, am I really the bad guy for divorcing my husband and asking him to give up his parental rights, just because he chose to miss the birth of our child to fly across the world and be with his ex, who claimed she was on her deathbed? Update 1. I've made up my mind. I'm going through with the divorce. That part's final. But I'm still wrestling with whether I should go for full custody or not. It's been 4 days since I first shared this, and Caleb has shown up at my house every single day since, trying to apologize, literally begging me to forgive him. And honestly, each time it gets a little harder to turn him away. But deep down, I know I have to stand firm. I have to follow through. Thankfully, my mother-in-law's been here for me the entire time. She's not only helped care for the baby, but she's also been my emotional rock. My parents had to fly back home 2 days after I gave birth, so now it's just me and her. And she's gone above and beyond. She even left her own home and moved in with me long-term because she knows I'll need help, especially with everything going on. I've told her that no matter what happens with custody, whether Caleb gets full, partial, or none, she'll always be welcome to visit her granddaughter. That's a promise I won't break. I've even asked her what she thinks I should do about custody, but she told me it's my choice. She trusts that I'll make the right call for both me and the baby, just like she thinks I made the right call with the divorce. But I'm still torn. It hasn't gotten any easier. If anything, it's gotten more confusing. Every time Caleb comes around, part of me wants to give in, take him back, and try to forgive him. But I know I can't. Not after what I've been through. Not after the way he handled things when I was carrying his child. Sienna's always been a sensitive topic for me, and he knew that. He knew how I felt, and still, he didn't care. And the worst part? I don't even know if he's been completely honest with me. Maybe they've been talking for longer than he's admitted. Maybe something more was going on than he let on. I want to believe him, but I just don't trust his words anymore. All his apologies have started to blend together. He just keeps repeating the same thing. Nothing happened. It was purely platonic. He only went because she said she was dying and he felt obligated to support her as a friend. But each time, I end up telling him the same thing right back. It doesn't matter anymore. I've made my decision and I'm leaving him. It's heartbreaking, but it's the truth. Update 2. A few days ago, I shared that I was certain about the divorce, but still unsure about custody. Well, I think I finally know what I need to do. Caleb showed up 5 days in a row, nonstop, trying to win me back, apologizing, asking for a second chance. But then, just like that, he stopped coming, completely disappeared. At first, it caught me off guard, but honestly, I felt relieved. I thought maybe I'd finally have the space to think things through clearly, without pressure. But that peace didn't last long. Not long after he stopped showing up, I started getting messages from other people, friends of his, saying what I was doing was wrong, that it was heartless, that they never thought I'd be the kind of person to go this far. And then the texts started flooding in, and I'm not just talking about his usual circle of friends. I mean everyone, people he knew from high school, college, even folks I'd never heard of. It honestly feels like he sent out some kind of copy-paste script, like he drafted a petition and asked everyone to spam me with it. Like I'm some kind of city ordinance he doesn't agree with and now he's trying to get the mayor to cancel me by sheer volume. At first, I just started blocking people, left and right. But then they started creating fake accounts just to message me again. Same messages, same tone. And after a while, it's like, how many accounts can you realistically block before it just becomes noise? All of this while I'm already dealing with the emotional fallout of everything that's happened. I'm still recovering from childbirth, physically and mentally. I've barely had time to breathe, let alone get proper sleep. And I'm trying to show up every minute for my newborn daughter, who needs me more than anyone right now. The stress is overwhelming, and this wave of messages is the last thing I needed in the middle of it all. If Caleb actually cared about me, even a little, he wouldn't be putting me through this at such a vulnerable, fragile time. But the truth is pretty clear. He's only thinking about himself. That much is obvious now. And with that clarity, I know exactly what I need to do. I'm filing for full custody. No more second guessing. Sure, he still has the paperwork. He can sign away his rights if he chooses to. But if he doesn't, I've already talked to my lawyer. We're going forward with this either way. The messages I've been getting? They've been nasty. There's no doubt in my mind that Caleb wrote the original message himself and just passed it along to all his buddies so they could flood my inbox. And honestly, that says more about who he really is than anything he said to me in person. And if this is what he truly thinks of me, then honestly, there's no reason for us to stay married at all. What really set me off were the messages, specifically one line that kept popping up. We never expected you to be the kind of person who would use your child as a pawn to punish your partner and play mind games. Seriously? He thinks I'm using our daughter to punish him? That's where his mind went. That line cut deep, not just because of the accusation, but because it showed how little he understands what it means to be a parent or a partner. If he truly had any clue how either of those roles work, he never would have said that. And honestly, that one sentence helped solidify my decision. When I showed the messages to my mother-in-law, she was furious. She said she wanted to call him right then and tear him a new one, but I asked her not to. There was no point. If we confronted him, he'd just lie and say he had nothing to do with it, just like always. But let's be real. The wording was nearly identical in all the messages I got. It's obvious he was behind it. And the part that baffles me, I have no idea why he even got his friends involved. Like I'm going to read a bunch of nasty texts from strangers and suddenly reverse my decision? These people don't know me. I was never close with any of them. Their opinions don't matter to me in the slightest. I guess he figured if enough people bombarded me, I'd give in to the pressure. But if that's what he thought, then he never actually knew me at all. I didn't cave when he was standing at my doorstep every single day, begging me to forgive him. I didn't bend then. And I'm certainly not going to now. The truth is, letting him back into my life wouldn't be good for me, or for our daughter. Yeah, it's been painful. Yeah, I've had moments where I questioned myself. But I stayed the course because I know myself. I don't fold under pressure. And after all this time together, you'd think he'd understand that. But clearly, he never really did. Every day, I feel more confident in my decision to leave him. And no matter how many people he sends after me, it's not going to change anything. If anything, this whole mess has only strengthened my resolve. As long as the people I love are standing with me, I know I'll be okay. Update 3. So here's where things stand now. The legal proceedings for the divorce and custody arrangement are starting in a few days. Caleb has decided not to fight the divorce itself, but he is pushing for partial custody of our daughter. We'll see how that plays out. I'm actually open to the idea, not because I feel pressured, but because I'm not a cold-hearted person. Still, I don't think shared custody should even be considered until our daughter is at least a couple of years old. That's what we'll be negotiating. And I'm honestly proud of the decision I've made. Now that everything is finally in motion, it feels real. I thought I'd be terrified at this point, but instead, I feel sure, like I've never been more certain about anything in my life. That confidence only grew stronger after a message I got from Sienna yesterday. She said she never meant to come between us, but she needed someone by her side, and with her parents unavailable, Caleb was the only person she could turn to. She also admitted that she had tried to reach out to him a few times over the past couple of years, but he always shut her down, telling her I wouldn't approve. But she figured her oldest friend would show up, especially if she was sick. That's why she contacted him. And yeah, she said she was sorry for all the chaos it caused in my marriage. But then she added that I should let him retain his individuality and not be so controlling. So I was right. He never blocked her. They had stayed in touch. Maybe not constantly, but enough. And here's the worst part. She admitted they shared a moment. They kissed. She claimed it only lasted a couple of minutes, and that Caleb pulled away and told her he couldn't do it, especially with his wife pregnant back home. Like I'm supposed to see that as some kind of loyalty? Please. That one detail was all I needed to hear to confirm everything I'd suspected. So now, with that confirmation in hand, finalizing the divorce and the custody terms should be simple. I've already talked with my lawyer, and we've adjusted our petition to ask for more, because honestly, I deserve it. I was clearly deceived. Anyway, I feel strong. I feel steady. I feel ready. Thanks to everyone who's been following along. I'll keep you updated as things move forward.